Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features X-Men number 66, cover dated August 1997. So there's a lot of text on this cover, including the creative team. This is a new device of Marvel Comics starting in 1997, whereby they give creator credit on the cover. So we've got Lobdell, Pacheco and Thibert credited there, and so we've got a guide as to who our creators are on the inside behind this cover by Carlos Pacheco, inked by Thibert, and colored, I think, perhaps by Steve Buccellato. The cover features Iceman on the cover caption, "Because you demanded it, the return of Iceman." I wonder how many letter writers did demand it. In any case, he's there shielding this doctor from these Operation Zero Tolerance sentinels, and it will turn out that this doctor is going to be front and center in the inside story, and a new character to be added to the X-Men mythos, even though she appeared briefly in the previous issue 65. So also in this era, Marvel are including inside fold-out pages that give you the details on the various characters. You can see one there for Cecilia Reyes, so we can infer that she's going to be important, everything that's happened to date. And so we don't have to have, the virtue of that is we don't have to have it shoehorned into the story, into either third person narrative captions or first person dialogue or captions. So the title of the story is Start Spreading the News. The location here is a hospital, our Mother of Mercy hospital. Really like the establishing shot here of the train on its platform there, and the worm's eye angle up at the hospital there with the cross on the side of it indicating what its function is. And then we're into a reception area. We've got bric-a-brac on this particular desk, including an edition of the Daily Bugle with a title story about the Thunderbolts, and also a little side story there about Washington Square Park's fortune teller. That's X-Man that is showing up on the cover of the Daily Bugle. So the title of the story is Start Spreading the News, and the creative team down here, as signposted by the cover: Scott Lobdell, writer; Carlos Pacheco, pencils; Art Thibert, inks; Comicraft, Richard Starking's Comicraft on the digital lettering. Oh, it's Liquid, so that's Christian Lichtner, so I reckon he's the cover colorist there on the colors of this particular issue, the digital colors. So the news report, it goes on about Operation Zero Tolerance. That's kind of repeating things that we're told here. And the newscaster says, regarding Operation Zero Tolerance, with a paramilitary organization operating within United States borders, some are beginning to wonder, are our worst fears being put to rest about mutants? Or is this the beginning of a crisis far worse? So, for reactions on these and other late-breaking stories, and we're going to get a reaction from one of the characters here in the hospital reception area. I got a reaction for you right here, says the guy with his, what is that, his colostomy bag? In any case, the receptionist there, she's delighted that the X-Men have been taken prisoner by Operation Zero Tolerance to OZT, she says, making the streets safe from these superpowered freaks. One of these nurses here says, finally we get to see some of our tax dollars at work. But this is Cecilia Reyes, Dr. Cecilia Reyes, and she's not so enthusiastic. But when her colleague pushes her about that she doesn't seem very happy, she responds, well, after a pause, I am. So she's drinking her coffee there from the styrofoam cup. It's about time the X-Men, all mutants, got what they deserve. And then more quietly to herself, and may heaven help us all. So why is she a little bit different from her colleagues on the question of mutants and the X-Men? Well, we'll discover very shortly. Meanwhile, it is a hospital, and it is in a part of town, we were told in the opening narrative captions, that is somewhat crime-ridden, the South Bronx, circa 1997. So in comes this stab wound victim, and Cecilia Reyes, she is a doctor, and she starts getting the information. Male, mid-20s, multiple stab wounds, severed femoral artery, thorax rather, pulse is weak, blood pressure dropping. So they're going to the what's it called again? Not the rehabilitation, but the emergency room, resuscitation room. That's where they're going. Lost the pulse, she says. Defibrillator, stat, prep the OR or the operating room. So in they go. This woman here is still harping on about the news regarding the X-Men being captured. There's something comforting about knowing plain old humans can still inflict this kind of damage on our own, eh? That's a pretty weird point to make. In any case, let's continue with the story. So we've got vertical panels here. Interesting upshot of Cecelia with the paddles there to defibrillate the stab victim. And so she's amping up the joules from 200 to 360. And she's there protesting that no one dies on my shift. But the third person narration says, Dr. Cecilia Reyes is a supremely stubborn young woman, always has been. It may be the sole reason she managed to study her way out of the poverty-stricken neighbourhood in which she was born. So we're learning a little bit about her back history there. And now a top-down angle from the ceiling, looking down at this guy with a stab wound there in the side of his chest. And the third-person narration continues, and commit herself to a 3-year residency at the hospital that often seems to be no more than a way station between here and the hereafter. Stubborn perhaps, but not stupid. She recognises the loss when she sees it. So she says it's official then. She gets the name of the man brought in. Gwyn Lancey died at 3:02 a.m. and I couldn't do a thing about it, she says. And the nurse says, as usual, you're being too hard on yourself. I'll start the paperwork. But the man on the trolley says, just like that, with a robotic type speech balloon. So that gets their attention. Interesting to see them here in mostly silhouette as well on this 3-panel page. Guy gets up, big anchor image of him pulling down his t-shirt and saying that he's much more than alive. He is one of the many Sentinel Prime units programmed to accomplish the goals set forth by Operation Zero Tolerance. So one of the nurse there is wondering, but you're flesh and blood, I took your pulse myself, what are you? So this is this new iteration of the Sentinels that is organic and so can fit in among the human population a lot more easily than the larger robot metallic ones of the past, designed by Bolivar and Larry Trask. Not those kinds of Sentinels. This is a new generation, maybe from the future. I am your salvation, the guy says, your last hope against the mutant that walks among you. So of course, like any Sentinel, he can detect mutant signatures, genetic signatures, and he starts blasting away there out of his fingertips. And Cecelia dodges the blasts, it seems, and she yells out heroically, selflessly, get everyone out of here now. And then in her third-person narration, we're told for years she's lived in fear of this moment. So here it comes, when her deepest, darkest secret will be cast into the open, when everything she's worked for, sacrificed for, and suffered for would be lost. So she's thinking to herself, please God, please don't let this be happening. But up comes the Sentinel. You've been identified as a genetic anomaly, he says to her, and as such, you're officially declared a threat to the continued existence of the human race. So she protests that she doesn't know what he's talking about, but he gestures his fingers towards her face. He's about to let rip with those blasts again. One day she knew her entire life would come to an end. So does it? Let's turn the page. We get a full page image of the manifestation of her mutant power. And this is what we're told about it. The technical term for the protective shield is a cytoplasmic biofield, extending 6 inches from any point on our body. It is triggered by the impact of any outside force, be it tactile, projectile, energy-based, or psionic. So this is an interesting power indeed. It means that she's shielded from any and all kinds of attacks. But the twist is that she feels the blast burns in my gut now as much as it did the first time, but it comes at a cost. So she feels a burning in her gut when it manifests, and she also will learn feels the blasts themselves. So more sentinels manifest. One of the orderlies turns out to be a sentinel too, and he grabs the nurse there, and some other human turns out to be a sentinel too. So now there's 3 of them attacking Cecelia. It will only be a matter of moments before internal circuitry calibrates a countermeasure for your force field, says one of them. All you need to do is give up. But she responds, I can't give up. This is a classic Carlos Pacheco pose here, where we've got this upshot 3/4 profile on the character. He's always moving figures around, twisting the anatomy like we have here as well, which makes for an implication of dynamism in the art and storytelling. So the techno-organic sentinel starts blasting at her, and she thinks to herself, I didn't mean I won't give up. I mean I couldn't turn off my power even if I wanted to. So it must operate on instinct. And she continues to think, I can feel each blast anyway, and it's getting worse by the moment. I can feel it giving, I think she's saying giving way. But then there is a sudden arrival. Well, we did have it clued in for us from the cover of Iceman. So columns of ice she sees, but how? And Iceman introduces himself. Dr. Cecilia Reyes, you can call me Iceman. I'm one of the X-Men, and I'm here to rescue, he says. Rescue you, he says. So 2 big vertical panels there. Lobdell allowing Pacheco's art to really shine and breathe on these pages. So I guess he feels comfortable working with Pacheco by this point. As a writer-artist team. Just 3 panels on this page. You can see another 3 on this one. So we're getting pacier storytelling during the action sequence. But she, maybe surprisingly, lashes out at Iceman there with the tray. Rescue me. She asks him, you've ruined me. You've ruined my whole life. What are you people doing here? He promised me he'd keep my secret. He promised. So who's the he she's referring to? And Iceman says to her, look, Doc, I'm unclear on exactly who he is and what he promised, but she covers his mouth, getting ready to punch him. Your leader, the one who created the X-Men, she says, about 3 years ago, he approached me, asked me to join his little school for mutants. I told him no, and he promised me he'd keep me out of this kind of insanity. So that's interesting regarding Professor X, that he's always out there recruiting, and sometimes when he's told no, he makes such a promise to those who refuse his offer to be trained at his school for gifted youngsters. So the sentinels haven't gone away. They attack her from behind, but of course her shield protects her, but not from the pain. The pain is getting worse, she says. Iceman says, amazing. You can actually feel the blasts through your force field. Yes, can't all mutants, she asks. And he replies, how should I know? It's not like we all belong to the same club. So Cecelia doesn't really know too much about mutants generally. She's got some assumptions that maybe others also share her shielding power. Anyway, the sentinels are blasting away at the pair of them. They're not saying anything terribly interesting. And Iceman picks up on that. He says, gosh, guys, you think after your boss Bastion spent all this money on overhauling sentinels, he would have shelled out a few extra bucks to pay for some new dialogue. So he's there protecting Cecelia behind his ice shield, but it's smashed by the sentinels. They say to him, it would seem you're without defenses. So he says, you think? I wonder how that could have happened. Cecelia replies to him, you're being sarcastic, right? Very, he says. I needed time to clear the room of innocent people. So Iceman, a trained X-Man, and one of the first lessons you would have learned from Professor Xavier is to get the civilians, get the innocent people out of the way of any superpowered fights. And then he uses his ice powers to do this. Encase everything but us in a block of ice. So this is his plan B. Cecilia's wondering what's going to happen next. Let's get past the advertisements. He turns to her. He says, so what's it going to be, Doc? You going to trust me or no? No, she replies. And he says, oh, well, too bad. And then he creates this hole. It must have been the one he emerged from, actually. He says, my job is keeping you alive as a doctor. I'm sure you can appreciate that. You can thank me later. Right now, we're headed to the sub-basement. So down they go into this big hole. This is an interesting layout on this particular page. Reminds me of a famous layout of Neil Adams's from his run on the original X-Men series. Could be issue 57, 58, something like that, where I'm trying to remember. I think Iceman was involved on the Beast as well, falling from a high rise building. But the thing about this design is it's hard to read because we're trained to read right to left and down the page. And so if you're doing that, then you end up down here, but you have to go here and then up here. So it goes against the way that we normally read a comics page. In any case, she falls, but she is taken care of by Iceman. You did that on purpose, this ice spike. He says, you asking me? No. Yes, I did it on purpose. He says, I had to know your capabilities. I wouldn't have let you fall. Let me seal up our elevator and we'll talk, he says to her. So moments later, 6, he says. 6 what? Or sorry, she says 6. 6 what? He asks. And now we're going to get her backstory, a little bit about her life. I was 6 years old, holding my father in my arms as he bled to death on the sidewalk. There was nothing I could do then, but I promised myself and him that the day would come that I could do something. That same night, I fell asleep reading my brother's science textbook. Maybe it was just a devastated child's way of dealing with a tragedy she couldn't understand. But from that day on, I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to help people. I've spent every waking moment of my life since then working to become a doctor. No, working to become the best doctor I was capable of becoming. 19 years of my life, she says. Everything I ever wanted, every sacrifice I ever made, gone in one night. So she's angry. Gone. Because you and your holier than thou friends had today your self-fulfilling war games with other people's lives. So Iceman says, I know what it's like to lose a dream, but she's deeply upset. She says, this wasn't a dream I was living, Iceman. It was my life, and now it's gone. So she slumps down onto her hunkers, backed up against one of his ice barriers there. So he gets down on his hunkers too and says, look, Dr. Reyes, you've seen the news about Operation Zero Tolerance, about what they're doing to mutants. Innocent bystanders like you and the other people in that ER, how they have support in a number of countries around the world. And she there with her head in her hand says, but your founder, Professor Xavier, he promised me I wouldn't have to get involved with this. And Iceman says, and I'm sure he meant that promise at the time, but what happened here today, it's bigger than Xavier. It's bigger than the X-Men. It's bigger than even just mutants. If this madness isn't stopped, and soon, it'll spread until the whole planet's engaged in a full-scale genetic war. The only way we're going to get through this is by standing together. I'm not saying I can give you today back, he says to her, but working together, we can make it until tomorrow. Then figure things out when we get there. What do you say? So she's refused every offer he's made to her up to this point. What will she say now? Turn the page. She stands up and she says, I'm saying, if you want me to trust you, I want full disclosure. So he says, deal. Who are you? And he's about to say, Iceman. Who are you? She asks, and then he gives his full name. One of the first X-Men ever. And then a little joke from Lobdell. Because, of course, Bobby Drake is a joker. Still the cutest. She doesn't respond to that. She says, how did you know where to find me? In the event particular files were compromised, he says. That happened in the previous issue. I was assigned the job of protecting your life. From where I'm standing, she says to him, you failed miserably. So not grateful at all. And he retorts, well, you're alive, aren't you? Just between you and me, I'm not really the leader type, he says. Really, she asks. Gosh, who would have guessed? And he now, the shoe's on the other foot, says to her, "You're being sarcastic, right?" Very. So that echoes the dialogue from earlier, but with the roles reversed. So she continues, "And where in blazes are we anyway?" So he explains that they're Morlock tunnels. She asks about the Morlocks, long story, but the scene shifts. So now we're down to the last 3 pages. The scene shifts to New Mexico, the repurposed Hulkbuster base that is now an Operation Zero Tolerance facility, and also the location of Professor X's prison cell. And he has a visitor, Bastion. And Bastion is taunting him about whether his telepathic powers are returning, and Xavier protests. "You know I can't access my mutant abilities, Bastion, or believe me, I never would have allowed you to strike down my former students the way you have," because Bastion showed him everything broadcast into his cell, and now he's paying him a physical visit. "Perhaps," he says, "but what do you say to a final fatal test?" So he's got that smile on his face. What does he mean? Coming up now, a double page spread to end the issue. Oh, after the bullpen bulletins though. Let's continue with this. There we go. "It is a sight that breaks his heart," declares the third person narrator. "Were he any other man, it would crush his spirit. It would obliterate any hope that was left within him." So his X-Men there, taken prisoner. Last we saw of them was in the previous issue. And Professor X declares, "Dear God, Bastion, what have you done?" "Done, Xavier," he responds. "I've learned your most tightly held secrets, and trust me, I'm far from done." So the X-Men are in trouble. Next issue, more on Iceman, Dr. Reyes, and the mystery woman who could hold the key to defeating Bastion. So what did Iceman mean when he said he wasn't a leader? Because he wasn't taking orders from either Cyclops or Storm. So who was telling him what to do and to go after Cecilia Reyes? And don't dare miss Wolverine 115 for the fate of these 5 X-Men. That's something that annoys me. I would much prefer that the X-Men who are starring in this particular comic, that we follow their story in this comic, in this title, instead of being shunted over to another title, even if, as was the case at the time, that I was reading Wolverine. In any case, I was collecting that comic, and I do have issue 115, but it's annoying. It's annoying, even now, even still. So there you go. And there's 1 page of letters here, issue 64. There's something interesting from one of the letter writers. He has an argument here about who Bastion is. He's an amalgamation of Master Mold and Nimrod 1. And he says, "Here's my reasoning. Nimrod is able to appear human, i.e. Bastion. Nimrod is sentient. Master Mold has the ability to create sentinels. Mix that with the knowledge of Nimrod's ability to appear human, and you've got human-looking sentinels. 4, Bastion has mentioned that he has been in the future. Nimrod came from the future." That's all very good. That's my conjecture. That's my guessing so far. So I agree with Mark A. Boyer. But what do you get in the reply? You get dodging around. Nice detective work there, Mark. But think about it. Are Master Mold and Nimrod the only X-Men foes who fit that description? So just kind of like keeping it mysterious. Next issue, Iceman and Cecelia on the run, and a mystery woman who may hold the secret to defeating Bastion. Advertisement there for a second Gambit miniseries by Howard Mackey and Klaus Janson. So Janson doing pencils and inks on that. Interesting little advertisement interview here with Joe Quesada for Marvel Premium cards. So it's kind of like mixed with photos, real world photos. So like this was like cutting edge at the time. Anybody can do this on their phone today. But at the time it was fairly cool looking. So you can see some of those images. Of course, his Daredevil, very cool there. And that is that. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Adjectiveless X-Men number 66. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comment section. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.